and welcome to another campaign diary and Q&A here on Slice and Dice, talking about the Many Lands campaign, and this time I'm going to be talking about sessions 20 and 21, as I missed the campaign diary last week due to work-related reasons. But back now to talk about both of those in tandem. But before we get on to that, I think more pressing issues than that and more exciting information to start off with. First of all, guys, I want to give you a massive thank you for following the channel, those of you who have in the last week in particular, and since Dragon Meet. For those of you who met me at Dragon Meet and then subsequently followed the channel and started watching, means a lot. Thank you so much for doing so. Couldn't have asked for a more warm welcome at Dragon Meet. First ever convention for me, so it was quite a big kind of overwhelming thing, but it was fantastic, and just to see not only other streamers but also seeing just the other aspects of the community, just seeing all of these craft stores, seeing all of these businesses all around Dungeons and Dragons, all about this wonderful game and this wonderful, and not just Dungeons and Dragons of course, but for all of the tabletop role-playing games, board games, and just other nerdy stuff that we all love. Thank you all so much for taking an interest and for then following the channel and seeing what we're up to. It really does mean a lot. And so first of all, thanks to our newest YouTube subscribers. Those are the guys who want to be watching the campaign at their leisure, and of course meaning they can watch every episode from the very start. So that's Neil Henderson and Christopher Rhodes. Thank you guys. It means a lot. And then of course on Twitch, those of you watching live, just as importantly, if not more so, big thanks to Kate Madison, to Angelati, Hendopolis, Tabletop Crafter, and Dedicated. Thank you all for joining, and yes, Dedicated indeed for subscribing to the channel, following the channel even. I will talk more about subscriptions in the future, because paid subscriptions and sort of perks for subscribers is something that we're working on in the background. But hopefully in the new year I'll have that ready to go. So I'll talk more about that at a later date. For now though, thank you all for following the channel and subscribing to the channel on Twitch. Just watching us, it means a lot. And speaking of Tabletop Crafter, one of our followers, they are our sponsors for our giveaway over this week. And so yeah, thank you Kerry for doing that, and for this lovely bundle I have right here in my hand. We call this Seth's swag bag, and to be in with the chance of winning this, just so you know what's inside, first of all, in this bag of swag is this vial of miniature playing dice. That's right, all of the dice you need: the D20, the D12, the D10, two D10s in fact, D8, D6 and D4, all in here ready to go. And alongside that, a D20 keychain, because you know you can't get enough Dungeons and Dragons in your life. So that's along with this handmade dice bag to add to your D&D collection, Seth's swag bag. To be able the chance of winning this, thanks to our friends at Tabletop Crafter, all you got to do is in the chat, if you're watching this live, write the word tabletop and you'll be entered into the competition. Similarly, we're also running the campaign, the competition, sorry, on social media. If you're not doing so already, follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. You can enter on all of those things. You just got to like the post about our giveaway. You've got to follow the channel, and then you've got to tag a friend in it. Nice and easy, and if you do so, you'll be entered into the draw. We'll be announcing the winner live here on Monday on the live stream at 6 PM, so tune in for that. Anyway, that all out of the way now, although I'd like to keep this a little bit on display, so I'm just going to leave it here for the majority, well in fact for the entirety of today's campaign diary and Q&A. So as per usual, if you have any questions, anything that you'd like to know more about within the campaign, just drop me a question in the chat and I will endeavour to answer it as quickly as possible. But without any further ado, so we've got to rewind a little bit to recap on where our heroes got to in the campaign so far. So in session 20, we picked up with the group as they had the idea had been floated to them by Councillor Potter of Hilberg that the party would head to the banquet at Rackfell Manor in place of the councillor, with one of the party in disguise as the councillor herself, being that the councillor has never actually officially met any of the members of any of these influential types that would be attending the party, and Lord Belvedere, the host, has yet to meet the counter, and therefore doesn't know not only what she looks like, but also doesn't know that her gender or race or anything like that. So no distinguishable features whatsoever. It was in fact Governor Henley, her superior, who'd been invited, but due to the fact that Governor Henley has his obligations at the Senate, he was not in town to receive it, and therefore responsibility goes to his subordinate, which is the councillor in this instance. So she's asked the party to go to the party in her place, due to the fact that it appears that the tainted wine that they discovered, which apparently had turned Dean Fringe into a werewolf, which was then let loose on the town, it appears that this tainted wine was in fact, or more of this wine, was delivered to the party at Rackfell Manor. It seems to have been delivered there some time ago. The group found a note alluding to this, and also a note saying that the other half of the payment will be at the Miners' Arms, which is also along the route. And what seems more uncanny to Councillor Potter is in fact that it's going to take 3 days by horse and carriage to get to Rackfell Manor. And so her and Gantbron had planned out the route, and they had booked rooms at 2 inns along the route, and one of those inns was in fact the Miners' Arms in Oraglor. Keep saying that wrong. Anyway, Oraglor. And so it's, again, seems quite strange. So armed with this information, they basically asked the party to go in their stead. Now the party were a little bit reserved to do so, because they have been tracking down for a long time now Lady Helene Grenforth, the ambassador from the Crowflies, on a philanthropic mission around Burikran to basically to help the poor and destitute, and basically to see what's going on in the war, the Cold War as it is, between Burikran and the Dragonborn Kingdom of Ruchir. There seems to be a lot of trouble and strife being caused by this fracas the two nations are having between each other. And so the ambassador was going to head along to sort of put in the good word and try and aid where she can. And then she went missing, and the party have been looking for her since, and they've been hot on her trail. But since arriving on Hilberg, that trail seems to have gone quite cold. So they were still keen to hunt her down, and had gathered as much that her abductors were heading towards Rundar, which is in fact in the same direction, for the first day at least, on the road towards Rackfell Manor. So it does kind of put them in the same direction. So, but hence they were a little bit uneasy about doing this, as they really wanted to take care of that before dealing with this werewolf threat. However, this seems to be the much more time sensitive of the two things, and so they have decided to pursue this lead instead. They took some convincing, and they did negotiate as best they could, and quite sensibly the members of the party who are more martial but don't have enchanted weapons have basically agreed to have their weapons silvered, or at least one weapon of theirs each silvered, so that they can still cause damage to werewolves. And in addition to this, the group were offered 4 healing potions and one more mysterious, more rare potion in a blue glass vial. This apparently will remove a curse from the person who drinks it. A very rare potion, not something you'd come across in most of your stalls or via traders called Phil, who have been carrying certain potions for 3 years. No, not like that. There was also the possibility that the group could be offered a place of residence within Hilberg, potentially a base of operations for them in one of the more high-end homes within the town, and possibly they may even be granted titles as well for their deeds. So here's hoping they may receive those things. So some negotiation later, they reluctantly agree to go, and they decide to bring Nerys with them. Nerys, who the sorcerer of the party, who has seemingly seemed to have lost her powers. She seems to not be able to cast spells anymore. But that's not to say that she's without her uses, because she still has a staff of the Rat King, meaning that she can summon swarms of rats 3 times in one day, which is pretty useful in of itself. And yeah, as much as anything else, I think the group kind of want to keep an eye on her. They're kind of worried that this has suddenly happened, that she no longer has her powers, and something doesn't seem quite right about her, so they want to keep her close. So anyway, there's then discussion about who exactly could be behind this tainted wine, this poisoning, and what would be their motive for it. Unfortunately, the group, along with the council, can't come to any hard decisions on this. There's many ideas that float around to do with wanting to do anarchy, to destabilize, to perhaps blackmail, or to otherwise kind of to bring about change in a forceful way. It's kind of a coup, I guess. Um, as well as this, Malar is cornered by Gant Bronn, who asks about why the party have been why Malar in particular has been asking about Lady Grenforth, and he tells them that they've been looking for her and that he was due to go with her on this philanthropic journey around Burikrin. And so Gant kind of sees this as an opportunity, and he quite brazenly, quite openly, out of earshot of everyone except Malar, conveniently, says that he is in fact a spy master from the Crowflies, and he has been looking to create a network of spies essentially within Burikrin and beyond, and recognises that given Malar's position that he could be a useful asset in that regard, and so he kind of comes to an agreement sort of with Malar that in exchange for giving information or finding information about the missing ambassador, that Malar would then not only be a set of eyes on him should he be required, but also that during this banquet, which Gant is attending along with the party, that he would try and protect Gant if he can. Which Malar, feeling very uneasy about this quite shady individual, reluctantly kind of agrees to, but he in a Loxodon way kind of crosses his fingers as he's doing it, so it may not really count when the time comes. But he even said quite openly that he will put the other members of his party ahead of Gant, but if it's a choice between them, but he will try and look out for him nonetheless. So not being deceitful entirely, but just uneasy alliance, I guess. So then Leobrin has to track down Fleeting Look, who disappeared after they made some inquiries at the Temple of the Eight in town, and as it turns out, unbeknownst to the rest of the group, Fleeting Look had gone off with Rexland Swordclaw, as he'd recently been made a member of the Order of the Broken Fang, and he was very proud of his new title as Lance of the Order, and he got a pin badge as well. But when he was last at the temple with Rexland carried out a ceremony, an initiation, basically, to indoctrinate him into his oath, so that Fleeting Look may finally, as a paladin, take his oath, and he took the oath of vengeance. So Rexland went through that ceremony, and as part of that, he kind of baptized him in water. And so Fleeting kind of, so Dan the player, with Fleeting Look, decided that actually he wanted to have a bath again, because that seemed to be the norm with the order. So Rexland just took him over to the inn and essentially gave him a bath, which Leobrin walked in on. But before Leo got there, he also bumped into Turin, and one of the dwarf brothers, who were the Bluebeards, who were elected to be bodyguards to the Lady Grenforth, and so informs Turin of what's going on. Although it seems Turin can't seem to find his brother Tinin. Last he saw, he was with the Fairfang cultists, the dwarven cultists within the town, which don't seem suspicious at all. They seem perfectly fine, and he hasn't been able to find him since. But he says he'll find his brother, and then they'll head on to Rundar together to try and track down the lady. Anyway, so after doing that, Leo then goes into the inn, is directed up to where Fleeting Look is, and basically walks in on him in the bath, and it's all quite awkward and hilarious for the neutral, and basically informs him of what's going on, what the plan is. Once the group have their weapons silvered and meet the strangely charismatic, if slightly awkward, captain of the guards, Jenna Paisley, they then regroup and decide between them that perhaps the best course of action is to go to this ball and stop, essentially the high and mighty, the movers and shakers of Burikrin all being turned into werewolves, because that wouldn't necessarily be a good thing. So they head back to the meet. They head back to Council of Plaza, having mulled it over and ruminated on it, and agree to go to Burikrin. Go to Rackville Manor, and they then embark on the carriage and head off on their way. Rexland Swordclaw of the Order of the Broken Flan also, because hearing that there are werewolves, potentially more werewolves that need to be vanquished, also agrees to join the party as well. And so it's quite a crowded carriage, but they manage to all get on there, because you've got not only the 6 members of the party, but you've now also got Rexland Swordclaw, Gant Bron, and also Howland Cragmere, which our guest star Midge, his player, who's a bodyguard, a Shield of Bron. He's a bodyguard to Gant, and his daughter, and Squire Laney. So it's 10 people. So 9 of them get on the carriage, and then Seth also has the one horse they have left from the Stonebreaker they stole, so he decides to ride the horse instead, and head on along their routes overnight. In the morning, they then come across, they can see in the distance Auraglor, their first stop on the route. Quite a dishevelled, dilapidated looking village, and quite a small village at that. But before that, they come across, and I had this all written down. I had sort of a random encounter sheet for the trail on the way to Rackville Manor, and one of the options I had deliberately written so that there were options. It essentially would be 4 highwaymen appear on the road and try to steal the carriage. But there was also an asterisk that basically said, if they're looking for Lady Elaine Grenforth, this will be the oxen cart that they're looking for. And so, and as luck would have it, rolling the D12 I had for this one, that one came up. So as they head along the route, they see this broken down cart. One of the wheels has come off, and there's an oxen drawing it. And there only seems to be one woman there who is looking for help fixing the cart. But as Seth sneakily, stealthily, and sleight of hand just kind of flicks up just slightly, should I say, slightly, pulls up the blanket covering what's on this open cart, he discovers that the statue of Lady Helene herself is there on the cart. This is the one they've been looking for. And as he's doing this, Leobrin is trying to... and it was Marshall's idea was to kind of start casting spells, but starting with something harmless, just to get this lady used to him casting spells. They don't think much of it if he then does something aggressive towards them. But of course, the first thing he did was Druidcraft, which, yeah, fine. But then the second thing he did was Mould Earth, and then start basically turning all of the terrain around the cart into difficult terrain. And the cart itself being like rising up due to it and being buffeted around by this essentially a tiny little earthquake. And surprisingly, that was taken as a hostile action. So on doing that, this seemingly sort of drab-looking lady in a very long robe then sort of pulls that off and pulls out a greatsword. She's got plate armor underneath, proper decked out knight, and the rest of her posse have been hiding in the trees, and they ambush the party. And it's all a bit of a scuffle. Does result in, it seems to be the two that normally go down, the monk and the rogue, both go down in the fight, but are revived, fortunately. And actually, what I was surprised about was that maybe not surprised, but perhaps I should have given a bit more thought to this ambush, because the knight is the most powerful, but was immediately surrounded, and so she didn't last very long at all. Where the scouts in the tree line are obviously did their job well. That's the best place for them to be, because they can fire from distance. And once Howland, I think it was, got into close contact with them, they're probably going to die pretty quickly. But the most deadly was, in fact, the priest, just using the priest stat block from the monster manual. And part of the reason for that was using the right spells. And I don't know all of the spells in the book, so I didn't instinctively know which ones would be good. But I knew that Guiding Bolt was a good spell because I've seen it in action. I know how much damage it does. It's a powerful little spell. So he was definitely using that to great effect. But also the other one was Spirit Guardians, which I hadn't used, but I sort of was looking it up beforehand. I thought, "Ooh, this changes things slightly." Had the priest been closer to the knight, he would have been able to keep her up longer, which may have made the battle more difficult, and it would have also meant that the priest wasn't relying on doing Spirit Guardians to essentially protect himself, and that's what brought down Brucon, the monk, because he went in there, failed the wisdom save, and then took a load of damage. And then I think he was still up after the first round, but then on the second round, start of your turn, you have to do the wisdom save again, and just knocked him unconscious. That proved to be pretty good, and I did note at the time that I kind of put a bit of flavour in there, changed up slightly by with this spell by having it kind of bring up sort of some dust and debris and essentially make it hard to see through, make your vision not very clear through it, to make him harder to hit, which would then, from range attacks, which would then be disadvantaged to hit, which does make the spell more powerful, more difficult to deal with. But I think, given the circumstances and given that there was 4 bad guys and there was 9 heroes, I thought that it was warranted, and I think it made for a more interesting encounter, because it meant they had to think differently. They couldn't just hit it from range out of the way. Or they could, but it would be more difficult to do so. And in the end, it was NPC Rexland Swordclaw who ran in and did his paladin thing of dumping smites into a hit and just one-shotted the priest, essentially. And then picking up, then we moved into session 21. That's exactly where we stopped session 20. Session 21, right then and there, after the dust has settled, they examine the corpses and essentially... though they can't pinpoint, not even Howland Cragmere, who is from the Crowflies himself, can pinpoint all of the houses, all these sigils and crests on these guys, on their tabards, on their armour. But he does work out that they are vassal houses to House Rookwood, and the leader, the knights herself, appears to be from House Rookwood, and also has an insignia denoting that she is a captain of the Rookwood Rangers, one of the elite forces of the Rookwoods, and one of the most revered in all of the Crowflies. So that in itself is like, that's quite an achievement. We managed to kill one of the Rookwood Rangers, or the captain of a Rookwood Rangers, which is that's a big deal. And then it was a nice moment in some ways, because so the whole storyline with Lady Helene Grenforth was really, it started off its conception was really about how Malar would then tie in with the rest of the party. It had to give this socially awkward and very sheltered Loxodon, man of the cloth, of the Hamfern Institute of the Eight, to give him a reason why he would then join a band of adventurers. And so he was meant to meet the lady at this tavern, which is where he met Seth, and that's where the whole shebang started from. So really, that was the start of it. I didn't realise how big of a plot threat hook that this would be, and so it's kind of rolled on over the last 20 sessions, and so it seems quite fitting to me that actually session 20, our 20th episode, was when they finally discovered her, or at least the statued form of Lady Helene Grenforth. So they carefully attach her to the top of the carriage, before they continue on their route. And Seth made sure that he left the oxen go. That's right, he let an animal go, he didn't kill it. Great. With that, the group head on to Oraglor, and the tavern there that they were due to stop off for the night, or for a sleep, for a rest, is the Miner's Arms. This was also the place in the note, in Dean Fringe's note, which they found, which said the other half of the payment should be collected from. Now, when writing this, I did anticipate that the Griddia members in particular would definitely follow this up. And the trick was, although I say it's a trick, it never promised anything in the note. It just said to collect the second half of the money from there. The players, some of them at least, didn't anticipate that D may well have already collected the money. So when he then showed up, the group had a plan to surreptitiously enter the inn by having some of them just enter sporadically, so that they don't all come as a group and create too much of a scene. And they also decided to leave the two paladins, Fleeting Look and Rexland Swordclaw, inside the carriage to watch over the statue, but also with Rexland, the latter being a dragonborn in a country that doesn't look too favourably on dragonborns a lot of the time, decided to keep him hidden away inside the carriage. So the rest of the party, sort of one by one or two by two, enter into the inn. The first part was quite amusing, with Leobrin and Howland Cragmere coming in and asking for the rooms for Gans Bronn, and Leobrin posing as Councillor Potter, until Midge himself completely forgot and let slip that the councillor was a female, to which then Leobrin, Martin's character, goes, "No, I'm not," and yeah, straight away, that kind of slip of the tongue can't be unnoticed. I did roll an insight check just in case, but Hogarth, the barkeep, was quite aware that he was being lied to, and so he decided to extort them on it and charge them 10 gold pieces basically for the rooms and for him to keep quiet. But Leobrin managed to negotiate getting some a round of drinks for his compatriots as well, which the barman reluctantly agreed to. Anyway, after this interchange, a bit later on, Seth then enters and says that he has come, that Fang has sent him, as the note says, and that he's come for the money. So Hogarth looks at him quizzically and then basically agrees, tells him to meet him outside at the back of the inn in a couple of hours. He was saying at sundown, but then Seth realised that they need to move on by sundown, they need to be on their way. So reluctantly, barman gives it in a couple of hours. This couple of hours gives him enough time to mobilise the trap, because Hogarth has been made aware that the money has already been taken, and he has been given instructions to basically anyone else to follow afterwards should be taken care of, essentially, should be beaten up and just cast aside. You don't want them in your inn. So he notifies a few henchmen, as it were, to come and ambush Seth, and they do so. Fortunately, it does, as this, whilst there's still noise inside the tavern, the scuffle outside also gets some attention, and Howland is the first to notice this, as he's quite perceptive with his perceptive shield, but also Brucon, being a little bit suspicious about where Seth's going, decided to stealthily follow him outside, and so it means that the rest of the party can then get involved and attack these thugs before they knock out our Mer-Elf rogue. Fortunately, yeah, he survives, they all survive, and they manage to take all three of them captive, at least temporarily, as Seth tries to get more information out of them as to who sent them and who Fang is and where Fang is. And this doesn't work particularly well, because generally when you start interrogating people and cutting off fingers or whatever, they'll tell you what you want to hear. Whether that's accurate or not is another thing entirely. And so they wanted to know who Fang was, but the truth is that those thugs have no idea. One of the thugs also had their hand cut off by Howland Cragmere, and you think, why is this? Because he, as a battle master, he used one of his manoeuvres, which was the disarming attack. And part of the disarming attack means that the opponent has to roll a strength save to basically hold on to their weapon. I rolled a natural 1. So I said, in addition to you knocking the weapon out, you also you don't just disarm him, you dismember him, you cut off his hand, because that would permanently disarm somebody. So it's the most effective form of disarming So it made complete sense, I think. But also, it seems to be that has been the most useful of the three captives who basically said, "Yeah, I know where Fang is. I'll take you to him." This guy has no idea. Um, so if you are part of the party and watching this, don't let this affect the session on Monday, please. But it shouldn't be a big deal anyway. But this guy has no idea who Fang is, where Fang is. They've just been told that they've basically just been given some money and told, look, if people start asking around about this, you got to go beat them up, and that's what they did. Now, as for the other two, Seth was trying to interrogate one of them and trying to get more information out of him. And then, as the guy was being uncooperative, he decided to stab him with his dagger. Now, talking to James about this afterwards, James was only looking to stab him in the shoulder or something, not to try and kill him outright. But as has come up before, when you are using a weapon such as a sword to damage somebody, but you're looking to knock them out rather than kill them, you can't really knock somebody out by stabbing them. Generally, if you stab somebody, they're going to bleed out, possibly die. Like, that's how it works in real life. That's how it works in my game. So I have said before that if you're looking to knock somebody out and you're using a weapon with a sharp edge like that, then you can use the butt of the weapon instead, which lowers the damage to a d4. In the case of a dagger, it doesn't really change the damage at all. It's still a d4, but you're just using the butt of the weapon. But he insisted he was going to stab into his shoulder, and so I think I misinterpreted that that's what he wanted, and in fact he kind of slew him because the guy only had 3 hit points anyway. So yeah, I just assumed he was just going to kill him for not, and because he was also saying to the captives that we only need one of you alive, and I thought he was being genuine. So I thought he just was going to go in there and kill one of them, which then happened. But fortunately, Malar was there to then heal this guy and bring him back from the dead. But still, that's shaky ground we're on. So Brucon then steps in as the monk, knocks one of them out, goes to hit the other one. This other one was tied up by Brucon, and Brucon didn't do a very good job. I made them roll sleight of hand checks, and he didn't roll very well for tying him up. And so this guy managed to loosen his bonds and got a dagger and then stabbed into Brucon, which would have been very dramatic in a film. However, because Brucon has a lot more hit points, he kind of just, got stabbed and then just pow, like went to attack this guy, who then flees. And in the chaos, then finally Nerys gets to use her Staff of the Rat King. First time she's used this, by the way. Summons a swarm of rats. Boom! They go chasing after this guy, and yeah, quite impressive. But also, literally tear this guy apart. They eat him alive. The party don't really see it because it's quite far away. But when Malar goes to inspect it, it's just skin and bones, which is just very disturbing. And so Malar then, to sort of atone for this, goes to bury the bones. Now he was advised by Ventrix II back at the temple after Ventrix had looked over Nerys himself that he was advised basically to keep an eye on Nerys, to watch over her, and that he couldn't pinpoint exactly what the problem was, what this malignant kind of issue that Nerys is having, this inhibitor to her magical powers. The priest was quite cautious about this and thought, oh, this is the work of evil. What is this? It must be the work of the Nine Hells, or something like that. So Malar has been charged with watching over her, making sure everything's okay. And so then seeing her kind of do something quite cruel like this by sending the rats out, which then just completely rip this person like flesh from bone, it's quite disturbing, I imagine, for Malar. And it's going to be interesting to see how DK roleplays with this going forward, because there was this obvious kind of almost paternal-like care for the young elf, but then she seems to have this incredible power and be able to do these quite awful things when you think about it. And so it's kind of, I guess the question is, how far will she go before he has to intervene, essentially, with things? So an interesting relationship with those two. I look forward to seeing how that develops. Anyway, with as far as I can recall, one of them dead of the hostages now, the thugs. 2 of them, one without a hand, then knocked out and then placed in the store area by Seth. Meanwhile, the bar is just turning into a riot as all these people just see it as a free-for-all and they're just taking drinks and taking what they can, ripping the furniture off the floor. Until Seth intervenes and basically breaks everyone up by just stabbing a dagger into the table and just demanding them all to go home, essentially. All got a bit out of hand, really. And there was also a moment with Seth, actually, with the denizens of Orglor as well on the way in, when he was accosted by a beggar just asking him for money. Now, we see these on a daily basis, unfortunately, with beggars asking for money, and this particular one, this particular beggar, then upon receiving some money, like some coppers from Seth, then demands more. Now, personally, I've been in this situation, and it's not a very nice situation to be in. It's very awkward because, on the one hand, this person is homeless. They're, clearly they've got some problems. They could really do with the money, but equally, it's when it turns nasty. It's when it turns aggressive, and then you're suddenly, like, you feel there's kind of a feeling of almost betrayal, I guess, because on the one hand, they're trying to elicit sympathy from you, and then turn nasty when they're not getting what they want. And so that's what happened in this scenario. Now, obviously, that's not what happens in the case of all homeless people, all beggars. That's not how it works, obviously. It's unfortunately, though, there are some individuals where this will happen. It's happened to me, and it happened to Seth in this instance. Which, again, because Seth doesn't really care about people, this kind of it's kind of reinforcing this isolation and this distrust of people, and I didn't do this deliberately at the time, but the more I think about it, the more it's like, this is pushing Seth as a character in a certain direction, because he seemed quite sort of isolated and seemed to be quite lacking empathy for most people, and so the more situations like this that are happening, the more it's reinforcing that idea. So I'm not saying that I'm going to skew things in the future to try and make this not happen to Seb, to try and bring him back, but it's just fascinating from a psychological perspective to see how this is affecting the character. And, of course, James playing the character as to how he plays the character. It's all very interesting. Anyway, Leobrin, above all, above even Malar, is just shocked by the display that he's seen, and he assists in the most non-lethal way that he can by putting people to sleep, the sleep spell. And sure enough, just as he's sort of consoling himself and trying to come to terms with what's just happened, still standing outside the inn, Hogarth then shows up looking very confused as to why he's there and why he's all alone. And it's just a lovely moment with Marshall just going, I can't sleep on him. Just the kind of resigned to the fact that he's got to do something here, but still not wanting to be part of things, but resigned to the fact that he has to be part of things. So it was a lovely little moment, and he puts him straight to sleep. And then he, along with Brucon, bring this guy inside and into one of the empty rooms. He's noticed by Gant Bron, who wanders over to check out what's going on and summons Howland, his bodyguard, of course, to go with him. And it seems that the two of them, Brucon and Leobrin, want to get some information out of Hogarth, want to work out more about Fang, why they were double-crossed, just things like that. They want to get this information from this guy. But Gant has also stepped in to assist because, well, for one thing, he knows how to get people talking, but also because I think this is probably an internal bit now. This is not going to be something the players know necessarily, but from Gant's perspective, the players have come in and basically turned this inn upside down, got a lot of attention on the inn currently, and there's going to be some serious ramifications to their actions. Their actions will not go unnoticed. So what Gant wants to do, one, is smooth things over and kind of bring back some equilibrium to life at the tavern, but also in a much more selfish and opportunistic way, Gant also sees this as a chance for him to acquire another source of information, to acquire another set of eyes, because, well, unless Hogarth complies with what he's asking to do, well, he'll just let the group continue tearing apart the tavern, essentially. That's, from his perspective, what he is looking to do. That's his angle. Anyway, with him wanting to kind of get this guy alone to talk to him, Brucon is uneasy about this, and I think Bart also witnessing what's happened before, and also Brucon being the sage and wise monk that he is, will also notice that this Gantbron is a little bit shifty. So he pulls him to one side. And another interesting character development with Brucon, because we had one in session 20 which I didn't talk about, but I will do now. But he revealed to Gantbron privately that he was a member of the Rumbleguts family. Now, the players, most of the players know this already, because Rudy, his cousin that Brucon started with, was referring to him as a Rumbleguts quite loudly. But Brucon himself is wanting to keep this quite hush-hush. He's kind of almost disowned his family because I think for shame, or perhaps because he doesn't want to be associated, because they are going down a different line to him. Like, his view on life is a lot different and doesn't fit with the perspective of the Rumbleguts merchant family. So perhaps that is why he left the name behind. But he reveals to Gantbron this name, basically says, I'm a member of a very powerful merchant family, and you don't want to cross us, essentially, is what he said. This time, unlike with Malar, Gant doesn't reveal that he's a spy master, but does reveal that he's a man of influence, and says, and they make an agreement of sorts between them, that he won't go and talk to this guy alone. He won't talk to Hogarth alone. That, of course, he'll bring Howland, his bodyguard, with him, just to make sure that Brucon was essentially making sure that Hogarth wasn't murdered by Gant, because he kind of felt like the language was quite ambiguous that Gant was using, and that he may remove him, sort of thing. The other bit of character development we had with Brucon was in session 20, and that was when so the party were trying to find out more about werewolves, and the biggest source of information they had on werewolves was in fact from Lainey, Howland's squire and daughter, because she had read a lot of stories about werewolves and other mythical beings like that. And one of the things that she had learned from her reading, there was one story of two lovers, one of which was bitten by a werewolf and turned into a werewolf. So they decide to lock them away while their lover goes to find this cure, and gives out, basically, apparently this cure was an elixir that has a kind of gold syrup kind of quality to it, and it emits its own kind of ethereal light from within it, and it's obviously an item of great importance, but supposedly also brings balance to basically brings you at one with the earth, and restores the natural balance and equilibrium that lycanthropy alters. So it was kind of a nod towards Brucon and his backstory, wanting to seek out the elixir of serenity is what he's looking for. He's looking for a brew, a potion that brings complete kind of inner equilibrium, complete balance in the world. That's his modus operandi. That's his reason for being. And so to then kind of hint that there may be something similar to what you're looking for, possibly, again, kind of help tie him into and invest Brucon in this mission to stop the werewolf plot. So yeah, she had a nice little moments there with character development. Nice sort of coming together with characters. And what was really nice, the party, now we've talked outside of the game a few times about having all of these different plot threads, because there's a balance you need to get to as a DM. On the one hand, you want to have interesting adventures. You want your party to be invested in those adventures. Equally, you don't want to be railroading them into one plot. You want them to give at least the illusion of free will. You want there to be a kind of sandboxy feel that they can pick and choose what they do. And the problem I was having to start with was that I was maybe giving them too many plot hooks in one go. So there was too many different directions they could go into, perhaps because I was leaning more towards the sandbox approach. And so what's been really nice over these last two sessions is then stripping those all back and then having it really like finely kind of sanding it all down. Can't think of a better analogy for some reason, but basically stripping everything back. So and finally, it seems that all of these different plot hooks had started to kind of coalesce, come together, and that final one being the finding the missing ambassador, quite neatly with that natural encounter roll, random encounter roll coming up. Anyway, fate clearly. Hashtag fate dice. Coming together means that now the party are all pulling in the same direction. The problem we were having before was that there were different people interested in different things and so pulling in many directions. Now this kind of pulls the focus back, and now everyone's moving towards the same goal, which in itself feels very satisfying. Again, don't want to kind of railroad people into one plot, but they're on that course now. There'll be other things that come up for sure, but it feels like they're united and coming together. So it's been satisfying for me as a DM to watch and to facilitate. And I know from feedback that it's been, I think it's been good for the players as well. I think they're enjoying now having a purpose together. And hopefully that will continue in that fashion. So one last thing before I go this time. So we've had, so in session 21, this week, we finally had Marta back with Neris, which was great. She's because I knew that she was going to be away for the last month. We had made some sort of arrangements just to make sure that her character is still in the world, and we can still do things with that character if the party want to while she's gone. But now she's back. We've had some interesting discussions. Those of you who will have seen the campaign diary. Where we talk about what happened with Neris when she went off on her own. Again, it's spoilers, so I don't really want to talk about it this time. You'll just have to watch that campaign diary to figure out what I'm alluding to here. But I've had to have some discussions with Marta herself to see how she plays Neris in this session and the next one. Safe to say, the story with why Neris has lost her powers is not over yet. There's sure to be more interesting stuff unraveling as time goes on. We may not see it next week, we may not see it the week after, but it's coming. The party have got more important things to be worrying about right now with this whole werewolf plot, but guarantee it's coming. And when it does unravel, I think it's going to be not only shocking, but also quite exciting and fun for the players too. So I hope and I hope it's as exciting for you guys at home. So anyway, that's it for the campaign diary and Q&A for today. I will be back with another one, I believe, next week. Let me just double check my calendar here. Yes, I will. I'll be back for another campaign diary and Q&A. At this time, that's 6 o'clock on Friday here on the channel. But of course, before that, I need something to talk about, and that will, of course, be our main campaign. That's on Friday from 5 p.m, I should have said. On Monday at 6 p.m. is our main stream. It's when we'll have our next session in the Many Lands campaign, and I hope you join me for that as well. And until then, guys, stay safe and have a great weekend. Goodbye.